course, joining me now to talk more about the markets and the path forward is Michael Renking, Senior Market Strategist for the NYSE. Michael, thank you for rejoining me here. So much to talk about.
Absolutely. Glad to be back.
Okay, so let's talk about positioning here as, look, the end of the third quarter is going to be here before we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're in an interesting time period, right? We've talked about on air, it's been widely talked about how kind of that August and September time frame tend to be a difficult time period for markets. Markets have completely bucked that trend. Something that we also did from a seasonal perspective kind of earlier in this year. Now, we do have kind of a key moment in time, approaching for tomorrow. So tomorrow we have triple witch expiration, which is the simultaneous expiration of stock options, index options, and futures contracts, right? And so that is one of the biggest liquidity events, kind of the year. That also happens simultaneously with the index rebalance, the quarterly index rebalances, right? So, historically, you look back, that has been one of the largest volume days, pretty consistent basis, over the last few years. Now, what we kind of see kind of in and around these kind of large options expirations is that from time to time you kind of get these turning points kind of within the market, right? So we've had a very big rally kind of over the last couple months, up until this point. We're going to need to see kind of how things shake out a little bit kind of as we head into next week. Kind of the flows associated with that event can kind of drive some of the short-term kind of activity. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing to kind of pay attention to kind of along with the kind of moving out of that expiration cycle is that you now start to see companies moving into the buyback blackout window ahead of earnings season, right? And so you have, I think the status are around 40% of companies in the S&P 500 are now in that buyback blackout window. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to move up into about 3/4 of those companies, right? That removes a little bit of the underlying bid that tends to be in the markets, right? So when you kind of get those two things kind of coincide, right, you can start to see a little bit more volatility.
So it's interesting here, Michael, the S&P 500 up by 0.4%, and this has got to be probably right near a new record high for the S&P. It was a relatively calm summer. August and September, more historically volatile months, but the calm has continued. Can we expect calm through the end of the year?
I'm not so sure about that, right? I mean, I think if you think about the backdrop, it's actually a pretty decent backdrop, right? So assuming the economic data, doesn't necessarily surprise, and we don't get any major surprises out of the White House, which is clearly, not a given, kind of with this administration, right? I think we can kind of continue to move forward. Something I think we've talked about, I'm not sure if it was on air or off air, right? But, this rally has been, kind of an underloved rally, right? And you've seen kind of the retail investor has participated in this rally, but you've seen kind of that the kind of professional institutional investment community, right, has been a little bit reticent to off of those kind of April lows. What you're kind of seeing is some of that money has been kind of forced back into markets, right, and you're kind of getting into this period where it feels like there's a little bit of a chase. Whether that can continue through the back end of this year, as as there's some catch-up trade that needs to happen, is kind of a really interesting setup.
Yeah, and of course, earnings season will be upon us soon. So I do feel like tariffs and trade, right? That's always going to be a topic du jour to cover. But anything else we should be looking out for as companies start to report their results?
It's crazy because it almost feels like earnings season never ends. Kind of as drawn as it's gotten, and even just this evening we get FedEx and Lennar, right? So we're going to get to hear from kind of two companies that are at kind of very interesting kind of points within the economy. Kind of FedEx, that global outlook, right? And then Lennar, obviously, kind of the housing markets. And then we have we move into kind of earnings season doesn't really kick off in earnest until kind of the middle of October. But I think we continue to be on this treadmill of economic data, right? Especially given the comments that we heard from the Federal Reserve yesterday, kind of trying to maintain that data dependence, right? It's that first Friday of every month is going to be really, really key when we get the jobs data, right? And then obviously kind of a week or two later where we get that inflation data, right? So I mean that's kind of some of the key points, paying attention to kind of what's happening with the government shutdown, but those things tend to kind of cause maybe a little bit of volatility in the short term, but don't really have any lasting effect.
Good to see some IPOs though here at the stock exchange.
Yes, it's been very positive. It's something that we've kind of talked about pretty consistently. We continue to see companies coming to market, right? We're seeing kind of very strong demand in that primary market, and the stocks continue to trade, kind of well on the back end, right? And you continue to see with volatility kind of compressing, right? We continue to see more and more companies, kind of coming, and the kind of the pipeline continues to look good, kind of through kind of Q4 and out into next year.
Okay. Anything else on your radar, Michael? Rate
Maybe
cuts
football.
next year. For football, yeah,
season
definitely.
is definitely on my radar. Waiting for some Saturday Penn State, but
Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
We got a matchup on my team. I'm rooting for the Hawks, and Lance Glenn, our podcast head, he's rooting for Rutgers on tomorrow night. So we'll see how that shakes out Monday morning.
Yeah, little Big Ten battles, I guess.
Big Ten battles, indeed. Always things to talk about here at the Stock Exchange. Michael Rankin, Senior Market Strategist for the NYSE.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
sir.
me.
Great to have you. All right, still